The alien marketplace was alive with colors and noise. Bright banners hung between stalls, and the smell of strange spices filled the air. Merchants shouted about their goods: crystal fruits, glowing breads, and tiny creatures in glass cages. Aliens of many shapes moved through the crowd, their clothes shining under the twin suns. In the middle of it all, a small human boy moved like a shadow. He kept his head low. His clothes were old and torn. Dust clung to his skin, and his brown eyes darted left and right. He wasn't here to shop. He was here to survive. His stomach hurt from hunger. It had been 2 days since he last ate. He slipped between tall aliens, blending into the crowd. His eyes locked on a stall selling solar pears of fruit that glowed faintly in the sunlight. He knew the taste only from stories, but today it wasn't about taste. It was about feeding his little brother and sister. The stall owner, a heavy alien with 4 eyes, turned to argue with another customer. The boy saw his chance. He reached out quickly, his fingers brushing against the smooth, glowing skin of the fruit. But before he could grab it, a hand like warm steel clamped around his wrist. He froze. Slowly, he looked up. A young alien girl stood before him, her skin a pale shade of gold, her hair long and silver like threads. Of moonlight, her eyes sharp and bright like polished silver were fixed on him. She looked about his age, maybe a little older, but her clothes were rich, clean, and marked with symbols of high caste. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice low but firm. The boy said nothing. He tried to pull his hand away, but her grip was strong. For a moment, they just stared at each other. The market noise faded into the background, replaced by the pounding in his ears. She could have shouted, she could have called the guards, but she didn't. Her eyes narrowed, studying his face. He didn't look like a thief. He looked tired. Hungry, desperate. "Let go," he muttered, his voice hoarse. Something in his tone made her loosen her grip. He yanked his wrist free and turned to run. The crowd swallowed him in seconds, but instead of forgetting him, the alien girl found herself stepping away from her stall and following. She moved carefully, keeping him in sight. As he weaved through the market, he slipped into a narrow alley that smelled of rust and damp metal. The sunlight faded as the buildings closed in. She followed, her heart beating faster. The boy stopped near a broken doorway. Inside, the air was cold and dim. 2 smaller humans, 1 girl, 1 boy sat huddled under a torn blanket. Their faces lit up when they saw him. He knelt, pulling a small piece of stale bread from his pocket and breaking it in half. It wasn't enough. He knew it. They knew it. The alien girl stepped closer, hidden by the shadows. She watched as he handed the bread to the children. Not eating any himself, her chest tightened. He wasn't stealing for himself, he was stealing for them. She had always been told humans were selfish, dangerous. But here, in front of her, was proof of something else. A loud noise broke the moment. Voices echoed down the alien guards, spread out. "The thief is near," one shouted. The boy's eyes widened. He grabbed the smaller children's hands and pulled them deeper inside. The alien girl pressed herself against the wall, her mind racing. She could call out and let the guards take him. It would be the easy thing to do. It would protect her reputation. But as the guards passed by, she stayed silent. She didn't know why, but she couldn't betray him when the voices faded. She stepped back into the light of the main street. Her heart still pounded. The boy hadn't seen her there. He didn't know she had saved him, but she knew she'd see him again. Somehow, she wanted to. And as she walked away, she couldn't shake the strange feeling that this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The next morning. The alien girl found herself wandering the market again. Though she had no reason to be there, her family's kitchen was full of food. Yet her eyes kept scanning the crowd as if searching for the boy she had seen yesterday, she told herself. It was just curiosity, but deep inside, she knew it was something more. She bought nothing from the stalls. Her steps light as she moved past the glowing fruits, the sizzling alien meats, the jars of colorful spices. She drifted toward the same narrow alley she had followed him into before. Her heart beating faster with each step, the street noise faded as she slipped into the shadows. Inside the alley, the air was damp and cold, the walls cracked with age. She peered around a broken metal door, and there they were, the boy and the two smaller humans. They were sitting on the floor, sharing something thin and watery from a dented metal cup. The boy was giving most of it to the children, his own lips barely touching the drink. She didn't understand. She had always heard that humans would fight each other for food, that they only cared for themselves. But here he was, looking at the children with eyes full of worry and care. She stepped forward without thinking. A loose stone under her foot made a sharp sound. The boy's head snapped up instantly. He rose to his feet quickly, his posture tense. "Why are you here?" he asked, his voice low. The little ones shrank back. Hiding behind him, she hesitated. She hadn't planned what to say. "I saw you yesterday," she admitted. "You almost got caught." His eyes narrowed, suspicion clear in them. "So? You followed me again?" She swallowed. "I didn't tell the guards." He studied her for a moment, as if trying to decide whether to believe her. "Why not?" he asked. She didn't know the answer herself. "Because, you weren't stealing." "For yourself," she finally said. He didn't reply. But his shoulders lowered slightly, the tension in him easing just a bit. She reached into the small bag slung over her shoulder and pulled out 2 wrapped food parcels. She placed them on the floor. "For them," she said, nodding at the children. They looked at the food with wide, hungry eyes. The boy glanced from the parcels to her. "We don't take charity from your kind," he muttered. Her lips curved in the faintest smile. "Then don't think of it as charity. Think of it as payment for yesterday." He stared at her for a long moment before finally kneeling and passing the food to the children. They unwrapped it quickly, eating as if afraid it would vanish. She watched silently, her silver eyes softer than before. Distant sound broke the heavy footsteps of alien guards. The boy froze, so did she. Voices echoed faintly through the alley. They were searching again. "We'll check the old sector," one voice said. She moved closer. "You can't stay here," she whispered. He shook his head. "This is the only place we have." She glanced toward the street, then back at him, her pulse racing, without another word. She motioned for him to follow. He hesitated. But something in her expression made him trust her. They moved quickly, the 2 smaller children clutching his hands. She led them through a side passage she knew well. The air grew cooler as they passed under an old arch and into a storage yard filled with abandoned crates. She gestured for them to hide inside one. The boy looked at her suspiciously again. "Why help us?" he asked quietly. She looked at him for a long moment. "Because maybe not all of us believe what they say about you." His brows furrowed, as if he didn't know whether to trust her or not. But there was no time for more words. The sound of boots was getting closer. She slipped out of the yard and back into the main street. Acting as if she was simply walking home, the guards passed her without a second glance, their attention fixed on the alleys. When they were gone, she returned to the yard and opened the crate. The boy and the children climbed out, still cautious. "They're gone," she said softly. The little ones looked at her with something almost like gratitude, though the boy's eyes were still guarded. She turned to leave, but before stepping away, she said quietly, "If you need food, come to the far end of the market at sunset. I'll be there." He didn't answer, just watched her as she disappeared through the broken doorway. That night, she lay awake in her bed, her father's voice echoing in her head, warning her that humans were trouble, untrustworthy, dangerous, but all she could see was the thin boy protecting the 2 smaller ones. His hands empty, his stomach empty, yet his first thought always for them. She didn't understand it, but she couldn't ignore it either, somewhere deep inside. She knew that what she had done today was dangerous. If anyone found out, she could be punished, her family's name could be damaged, but for the first time in her life, she didn't care. She didn't know it yet. But this choice, this quiet act of kindness, was the first step on a path that would change both their lives, forever. Days passed before he came to her. It was late, the market almost closing, the twin suns sinking into the horizon, shadows stretching long across the ground. She stood near the farthest stall, pretending to inspect a tray of shining blue stones. But her eyes kept scanning the street, and then she saw him. He moved carefully, keeping his head low, the two smaller children nowhere in sight. His clothes were just as worn, but his eyes seemed sharper now. Watching everything, he stopped. "Few steps away, you said sunset," he murmured, as if unsure if he should be here at all. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small cloth bundle, handing it to him without a word. He didn't take it right away. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice quiet but with a hint of suspicion. "Because I want to," she said simply. He shook his head. "No one wants to help humans unless they want something back." She tilted her head, studying him. "Maybe I'm not like the others." He opened the bundle. Inside were slices of baked root and a small container of fruit paste. His stomach growled before he could stop it. She saw the flicker of embarrassment in his eyes, but said nothing. "Where are they?" she asked softly, meaning the children, hidden. He replied, "It's safer that way." The market bell rang in the distance, signaling the end of the day. Merchants started packing their goods, and the streets grew quieter. They began walking together without planning it, their steps naturally falling into the same rhythm. He didn't talk much, but she filled the silence with small questions. Learning that his name was Cale, that he had been living in the old human sector since he could remember, and that his parents were gone. When they reached the edge of the sector, Cale stopped. "You shouldn't come here," he said, his tone almost protective. "If someone sees you, they'll talk." She smiled faintly. "Then they'll talk." He looked at her for a moment, as if searching for a reason to push her away. But he didn't find it. He simply said, "You're strange," she replied. "I've been told that," and turned to leave. In the days that followed, their meetings became more frequent, sometimes at the market, sometimes near the old tunnels where few dared to go. She brought food or simple medicines, and, in return, he told her pieces of his life, how he learned to hide, how he found ways to survive, how he taught the children to keep silent when guards passed by. One evening, as they sat near a crumbling wall, she asked, "Do you ever think about leaving the city?" He laughed once, a short, bitter sound. "And go where?" "Outside is worse." She didn't know what to say, but his words stayed in her mind long after they parted. Her world and his were never meant to touch, yet they did, and each time it left a mark. It was during one of these quiet meetings that the danger became real. They were near the back of an abandoned storage building, talking in low voices when Cale suddenly went still. "Someone's here," he whispered. She turned, and from the shadows, a tall alien stepped forward. His clothes marked with the crest of her caste, her fiancé. His eyes were sharp with suspicion. "So this is where you disappear to," he said coldly, his gaze shifting to Cale. A human thief, Cale stood, his jaw tight. But before he could speak, the alien man continued, "Do you know what this will do to your families?" "Name." His voice carried both anger and pleasure. As if he'd been waiting to catch her in something like this, she stepped between them, her heart racing. "He's done nothing wrong," she said firmly. Her fiancé's eyes narrowed. "We'll see what the council thinks of that." Cale glanced at her, then at the other man, his hands curling into fists. He could run, but he didn't want to leave her standing alone. The air felt heavy, the silent stretching. And then her fiancé turned sharply. "Go home," he ordered her. "And you?" he looked at Cale. "I'd disappear before the patrol's here." "About you." He left without another word, but she knew it wasn't over. Cale looked at her. "You're going to get in trouble." She met his gaze steadily. "Then I'll be in trouble." And for the first time, he didn't try to argue. That night, neither of them slept well. Somewhere in the city, whispers were already starting. And the fragile thread that connected them was about to be tested in ways neither could yet imagine. The next morning, the air in her home felt heavy. Her father was already waiting in the main hall, his long robe draped across the steps, the crest of their family bright against the dark fabric. He didn't look angry at first, but his eyes cold and sharp told her everything. "Sit," he said. His voice calm in a way that made her heart beat faster. She obeyed, folding her hands in her lap. He spoke slowly. "Your fiancé came to see me last night." The words made her chest tighten. "He said he found you with a human boy, unknown." "Thief." She opened her mouth to protest, but he raised a hand to silence her. "I told him my daughter would never disgrace our name like that. But tell me, am I wrong?" She looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's not what you think." Her father's tone hardened. "He's human. That's all I need to think." Her fingers curled, frustration building in her chest. "He's only trying to protect his brother and sister," she said quickly. But her father's expression didn't change. "You are to stay away from him, from all of them." His voice was final. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every shadow in her room seemed to move. Every sound outside felt like footsteps coming to take Cale away. She remembered his guarded eyes, the way he stood between her and her fiancé, the quiet thank you he never said, but she always felt. By midnight, she made her choice. 2 nights later, Cale wasn't in the market. She found him in a hidden corner of the old sector, repairing a piece of broken metal to use as a cooking plate. When he saw her, his eyes flickered with surprise. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Your father's men have been asking questions." She stepped closer, her voice low. "He knows." "And so does your fiancé." Cale froze, his jaw tightening. "Then I should leave," he muttered. But she shook her head. "If you run now, they'll hunt you. They'll take the children." He looked away, his hands gripping the metal plate. "Hard. What do you suggest?" "Stay here and wait for them to drag us away." Her heart pounded. "I can help you disappear. At least for a while." He didn't answer right away. Just studied her. "Why would you risk this?" "You could lose everything." She met his gaze. "Maybe some things are worth losing." There was no hesitation in her voice, and that unsettled him more than anything later that week. She smuggled small bundles of food and clothing into the old tunnels beneath the city. The tunnels were dark, damp, and dangerous, but they connected to places even the guards avoided. Cale led the children there at night, carrying the smallest one on his back. She walked beside him, her steps sure, even when the path was uneven. They stopped at a hidden chamber where the ceiling had collapsed long ago, the starlight spilling in through cracks. Here they could rest without being seen. "It's not much," she said quietly. "But it's safer than the streets," Cale nodded, his face unreadable. For days they stayed in the tunnels. She visited when she could, bringing whatever she managed to hide from her family. But danger was never far. One evening, the echo of boots carried down the tunnel long before the guards appeared. Cale grabbed the children. She pressed her back against the wall. The sound grew louder. The guards were searching. One beam of light swept across the tunnel wall, then moved away, voices fading. They all stayed silent until the sound was gone completely. Cale let out a slow breath. "They're getting closer," he said. She looked at him, determination in her silver eyes. "Then we'll move farther." But that night, as she walked home, her fiancé was waiting at the gate, his arms crossed. a smirk on his lips. "I know where you've been," he said, his tone dripping with satisfaction. She didn't answer, just walked past him, but his voice followed. "The council will hear of this. And when they do, not even your father can protect him." Her steps didn't falter. But inside, her stomach turned cold. She knew the next move wouldn't be in the shadows anymore, would be in the open, and everyone would see where she stood. The council chamber smelled of polished stone and cold authority. High windows let in pale light that made everything look sharp and unforgiving. She stood near the center, her hands clasped tightly, her father beside her, his face carved from stone. Across the room stood her fiancé, his voice already filling the space. "I caught her aiding a human thief," he said loudly, making sure every elder in the room heard. Not once, but many times. She has been seen in the human sector, carrying food and supplies, even leading him and his kind through restricted areas. Murmurs rippled through the council, some in shock, others in quiet approval of his boldness. Her father didn't look at her, but his jaw was set, his silence heavy. One of the older council members turned his piercing gaze to her. "Is this true?" She felt the eyes of the room pressing against her. She could lie. She could deny everything. She could protect herself, but she thought of Cale, how he always stood in front of the children, taking every risk for them. "It's true," she said clearly. The room stirred. Some gasped. Others leaned forward as if waiting for more. Her fiancé smiled thinly. "Then you admit you have betrayed your caste?" She met his gaze with steady eyes. "If kindness is betrayal, then yes." The council leader's voice cut through the noise. "The human will be taken at once, and his siblings too. They will be sent to the labor colonies before nightfall." Her chest tightened. She stepped forward. "No, you can't," but two guards were already moving toward the doors. Outside, in the old sector, Cale was gathering scraps of cloth to wrap the children in against the coming cold. When heavy boots pounded against the cracked streets, he turned, eyes narrowing. The patrols were coming in numbers. The children clung to him, and for a moment, he considered running. But the narrow streets were already blocked. Back in the council chamber, she made her choice. Ignoring her father's warning glance, she turned sharply and ran. The guards called after her, but she didn't stop. Her feet carried her through the winding streets faster than she'd ever moved. She reached the old sector just as the patrol was cornering Cale. Two guards grabbed his arms. The smallest child cried out. She pushed forward, shoving herself between them. "Let them go," she shouted. The guards hesitated only for a breath before one spoke. "Council orders," she cut him off, her voice fierce. "And I am countering them." The guards exchanged uneasy glances. "You have no authority here," one said. She stepped closer, her silver eyes blazing. "Then arrest me too. But you'll have to explain to the council why the daughter of House Vera is chained beside a human." The patrol leader's jaw tightened. This wasn't a fight he wanted, not with her family name involved. "You have until sunrise to get them out of the city," he said finally, then gestured for his men to fall back. Cale stared at her, stunned. "You just made yourself a target." She nodded once. "So did you. The day you fed them instead of yourself." There was no time for gratitude, no time for argument. She led them quickly through the narrowest back alleys, the sound of the market bells in the distance marking the hours they had left. Cale carried the youngest while the other clung to her hand. They moved fast, but every step felt heavier with the weight of what they were leaving behind. When they reached the tunnels, the cold air wrapped around them like a warning. The path ahead was dark, damp, and full of unknown dangers. She stopped only once, looking back toward the faint glow of the city, her home, her status, everything she had known, and then she turned away, following Cale into the dark, somewhere above them. The council would already be whispering. Her father would be deciding. If she was still his daughter, her fiancé would be sharpening his next attack, but none of it mattered right now. The only thing that mattered was that they had until sunrise to vanish, and she intended to keep that promise. The desert wind cut across the open plains, carrying with it the taste of dust and metal. Caravans rolled along the horizon, their banners snapping under the fading sun. In the middle of it all, a diplomatic convoy was arriving at the alien capital. Guards lined the roads, their armor shining, their faces set in stone. She stood on the steps of the council hall. Years older now, her silver hair tied high, her clothing simpler than it once had been, her family crest no longer worn openly. She had not set foot here in almost a decade. Not since that night she fled through the tunnels with Cale and the children. A horn sounded, the convoy halted, and the doors of the lead vehicle slid open. A tall man stepped out. His presence calm but commanding, his uniform sharp. Marked with the seal of the Human Alliance, his gaze swept the crowd and then stopped on her. Her breath caught. It was him, Cale, older, stronger, the boy she had once hidden in the shadows. Now carried himself like a man who had walked through fire and come out unburned. The years had carved strength into his face, his eyes still the same deep brown, but no longer guarded. Now they held the weight of someone who had earned his place. The council members stepped forward to greet him, but Cale's attention didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on her as if no one else existed. Whispers began to ripple through the gathered officials. Some recognized her, some recognized him. Fewer understood what that look between them meant when the formal greetings were done. Cale approached, every step measured, the sound of his boots on the stone steps echoing in her ears. "You haven't changed," he said softly when he was close enough. She let out a small breath. "You have." He smiled faintly. "Maybe, but not where it matters." They walked together into the shaded courtyard away from the others, the air between them charged with everything left unsaid. "I heard stories," she said quietly, "that you led the negotiations at the border war, that you saved colonies from famine." His smile deepened, but his tone was light. "I had a good example once." She shook her head slightly. "You did all that yourself." They stopped near a fountain, the water catching the last light of the day. For a moment, it was like the years between them disappeared. Only the sound of water and the quiet space between their words remained. But the world hadn't stopped moving. The Human Alliance's arrival meant new treaties and new dangers. "Why are you here, Cale?" she asked at last. He studied her face for a long moment, officially. "To build peace between our people," he said, unofficially. "To see you again," the words hit her like a slow heartbeat, steady but deep. She glanced toward the council hall. "If they see us," he interrupted, "let them." His tone was firm. "I didn't cross half the galaxy to stand in the same city as you and pretend I don't care." The sun had almost disappeared, leaving the sky painted in shades of violet. Before she could answer, a sharp voice called her name from the far side of the courtyard. Her old fiancé, older now, but still carrying the same arrogance, was walking toward them, his eyes narrowing when he saw Cale. "So the human returns," he said coldly, "and already finds his way to you." Cale didn't flinch. "I'm not here to take what isn't offered." His gaze didn't leave hers. "But I won't leave without saying what I came to say." Her old fiancé scoffed. "Careful, boy. You forget where you are." Cale's voice was calm. "No, I remember exactly where I am. And who I'm speaking to." The tension in the air was almost solid. She knew the next words spoken could start more than an argument. They could set off a chain of events no one could stop. She looked between them, the man who once tried to destroy her life, and the boy she had once saved who now stood before her as an equal, stronger than both of them had ever imagined. Her choice, she knew, would come soon, and this time it would not be in the shadows, it would be under the full light of the council, with the entire world watching. The council hall was full, the high walls echoing with the sound of voices. Alien leaders in their finest robes sat in curved rows. The human delegation stood opposite, their uniforms crisp, their faces serious. In the center stood her, a single figure between two worlds. The council leader's voice cut through the noise. We are gathered to finalize the peace accord between the human alliance and the high castes. His eyes moved to her, and yet, there is an unexpected matter, one of personal nature that has been brought to our attention. Whispers spread through the chamber. She felt dozens of eyes on her. Her old fiancé stood proudly near the front, his smirk thin and sharp. The council should know, he said loudly, that this woman once betrayed her people for a human thief, and now she intends to do the same under the guise of diplomacy. His words were chosen like blades, each meant to cut. Across the room, Cale stood tall, his gaze fixed on her, his expression calm but unyielding. He didn't try to speak in his defense. He didn't plead. He simply waited. As if trusting her completely, the council leader turned to her. Is there truth in this accusation? His tone was measured, formal. She could have denied it, could have hidden behind politics, but she thought of the boy in the market years ago, his thin hands feeding the children before himself. She thought of the nights in the tunnels, the fear in every step, the promise they had made before sunrise. It's true, she said, her voice clear. The hall fell silent. I helped him. I protected him. I stood beside him when no one else would, and I would do it again. Her father closed his eyes briefly. As if feeling the weight of her words, her fiancé's voice rose, sharp and mocking. Then let the record show she chooses humans over her own kind. She turned to face him. I don't choose by kind. I choose by heart. A murmur ran through the crowd, some shocked, some impressed. She took a slow breath, then turned toward Cale. I choose him. Her words hung in the air like a strike of lightning. Cale's eyes softened, but he didn't move. The council leader's brow furrowed. Are you declaring an alliance of marriage? The room shifted, half in disbelief, half in anticipation. She didn't look away from Cale. Yes, she said, not for politics, not for image, but because the man you call a thief is the one who showed me what honor truly is, for a heartbeat. No one spoke. Then the hall erupted, voices overlapping. Some in protest, others in support. The council leader struck his staff against the floor, calling for order. If this is your wish, it will bind your houses together, and it will stand as a symbol to both our peoples. Her father finally looked at her, his eyes unreadable, and after a long pause, he gave the smallest of nods. Not in full approval, but in acceptance. Cale stepped forward, crossing the space between them. The sound of his boots steady and sure. He stopped just before her, the faintest smile touching his lips. You always did make impossible choices, he said quietly, and somehow they always worked. She smiled back. Only because you were there to make them worth it. The council leader's voice rose again. Let it be recorded, on this day, in this chamber. The union between House Vera and the Human Alliance is declared. The formal words echoed, but she barely heard them. All she saw was Cale's hand reaching for hers. The hall, the politics, the whispers, they all faded for a moment, leaving only the two of them standing together, not as a high-born alien girl and a starving human boy, but as equals who had walked through danger and years apart to find their way back. And as the ceremony seals were pressed into the accord, she knew this was not the end of their story, but the beginning of something far greater.